A single janitor walks into the CEO's office late at night and stumbles upon a hidden spy camera. Everyone expected him to stay silent, but what he did next exposed a scandal that would change the company forever. This is a story about integrity, bravery, and the quiet heroes who walk among us. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Stories like this remind us that courage comes from the most unexpected places. The late-night discovery. The hum of the fluorescent lights was the only sound in the empty halls of Summit Dynamics. The office tower, a sleek glass monolith in the heart of Chicago, stood silent at this hour. Its daytime buzz of meetings, phone calls, and keyboard clatter long faded. Most employees had left hours ago, retreating to their homes, their families, their lives beyond the corporate grind. But Carlos Mendez was still here. He moved methodically, pushing his cleaning cart down the executive wing, the wheels squeaking faintly against the polished marble floor. At 58, Carlos knew this building better than anyone. He knew which floorboards groaned underfoot, which coffee machine always leaked, and which executives stayed late, and which ones pretended to. He had been cleaning these offices for 12 years, a silent witness to the rise and fall of egos, the whispered deals, the quiet scandals. Tonight, something felt different. Maybe it was the way the air seemed heavier, charged with an unspoken tension. Or maybe it was the way the shadows stretched longer than usual, the dim emergency lights casting eerie shapes along the walls. Whatever it was, Carlos couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. He paused outside the CEO's office, a sprawling corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. Daniel Cray's name was etched in bold letters on the door. Carlos had never spoken more than a few polite words to the man, but he knew his habits. Cray was meticulous, controlled, never leaving so much as a stray paperclip out of place, which was why the sight of his slightly ajar door made Carlos frown. He hesitated. Protocol said he wasn't supposed to enter an executive's office if the door was closed, let alone unlocked. But something nagged at him. Maybe Cray had forgotten to lock it. Maybe he was still inside. Gently, Carlos pushed the door open. The office was empty. Still, he stepped inside cautiously, his sneakers silent on the plush carpet. The desk, a massive slab of dark mahogany, was pristine as always. No stray papers, no half-empty coffee cups. Just a sleek laptop, a leather-bound planner, and a single-framed photo of Cray shaking hands with some politician Carlos didn't recognize. He began his usual routine, dusting the shelves, wiping down the glass table, emptying the trash bin. But as he reached for the desk, something caught his eye, a tiny, unnatural glint in the ceiling smoke detector. Carlos froze. He wasn't an expert in surveillance, but he'd seen enough movies to recognize a camera lens when he saw one, and this one was pointed directly at Cray's desk. His pulse quickened. Why would there be a hidden camera in the CEO's office? Security already monitored the halls, the elevators, the entrances. But this felt personal. Before he could process the implications, a sound cut through the silence. Footsteps. Sharp, purposeful. Coming closer. Carlos's breath hitched. He had no business being in here. No excuse if he was caught. Instinct took over. He ducked behind the door just as it swung open. Evelyn Cho, the company's O, strode in, her phone pressed her ear. Her voice was low, urgent. The files are almost ready. Once Cray signs, we bury this. A pause. Then, colder, no loose ends. Carlos's blood turned to ice. Cho hung up and left as abruptly as she'd arrived, the door clicking shut behind her. For a long moment, Carlos didn't move. His mind raced. This wasn't just about a camera. This was about something bigger, something dangerous. And he was the only one who knew. The whistleblower's dilemma. The fluorescent lights of the subway car flickered as Carlos gripped the metal pole, his knuckles white. The rhythmic clatter of the train against the tracks did nothing to calm the storm in his mind. He kept replaying the scene in Cray's office, the hidden camera, Cho's hushed words. No loose ends. What had he stumbled into? His stop approached, and he stepped onto the platform, the night air biting against his skin. The walk to his apartment was short, But every shadow seemed to stretch longer tonight, every passing car moving just a little too slowly. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The lock clicked open and he stepped inside. The familiar scent of home, cumin, garlic, the faintest hint of his daughter's vanilla perfume, washing over him. "Poppy?" Marisol's voice came from the kitchen. She stood at the stove, stirring a pot of caldo de pollo, her dark brows furrowing as she took in his expression. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Carlos forced a smile, hanging his jacket on the hook by the door. "Just tired, Mija." She wasn't fooled. Marisol had inherited her mother's sharp eyes, the ones that missed nothing. At 25, she was already a paralegal at a downtown firm. Her dreams of law school just a few scholarships away. She knew when someone was hiding something. She turned the stove to simmer and crossed her arms. Did something happen at work? Carlos hesitated. He had always shielded her from the uglier parts of life. The long hours, the sore back, the occasional disrespect from executives who barely glanced at him. But this wasn't just about him. He sank into the worn couch, the springs creaking under his weight. "I found something tonight, in the CEO's office." Marisol sat beside him, her full attention on him now. "What kind of something?" "A camera, hidden in the smoke detector." Her eyes widened. "Like the security camera?" Carlos shook his head, pointed right at his desk. And then Cho walked in. She was on the phone, talking about burying something, about loose ends. Marisol sucked in a breath. That's not just corporate espionage. That sounds like blackmail." The word hung between them, heavy and dangerous. Carlos rubbed his temples. "What do I do? If I report to security, what if they're in on it?" Cho's the soul. She's got half the board wrapped around her finger. Marisol chewed her lip, thinking. "You could go to Cray directly." "And say what?" "Hey, your second in command is spying on you." "He'll think I'm paranoid. Or worse, a liability." Silence settled over them. The tick-tock of the wall clock filled the room. Marisol reached for his hand. "Poppy, if this is as bad as it sounds, you can't just ignore it." He knew she was right. But speaking up meant risking everything. His job, his visa, the fragile stability they'd built. The next morning, Carlos moved through his routine like a ghost. Dust mop, empty trash, all while his mind raced. He needed proof. Something undeniable. During his lunch break, he slipped into the custodial supply closet and pulled out the old flip phone he kept for emergencies. He'd never been one for technology, but today it was his only weapon. He typed out a message, his fingers clumsy on the tiny keys. "Check the smoke detector in your office. Trust no one." He read it twice, then deleted the draft. Too risky. If anyone saw it, if they traced it back to him. No, he needed another way. An idea struck him. The intern. Jake Reynolds was a fresh-faced kid, barely out of college, who always thanked Carlos when he emptied his trash. He was naive enough to believe in corporate honesty, and disposable enough that no one would suspect him. Carlos found him at the copy machine, drowning in a stack of files. "Long day?" Carlos asked, feigning casualness. Jake groaned. "Cho's got me prepping for some big merger. I've been here since 6. "Perfect." Carlos lowered his voice. "Listen, I overheard something. Weird. About Cray's office. There's a camera in the smoke detector. I think someone's spying on him." Jake blinked. "What?" "That's insane." "I know, but if it's true, shouldn't someone tell him?" Jake hesitated, then nodded. "I'll slip him a note. Anonymous." Carlos exhaled. It was out of his hands now. By noon, the office was in chaos. Carlos was mopping the lobby when a swarm of security guards rushed past, radios crackling. Then came the shouting, Cho's voice razor-sharp, echoing down the hall. "Find out who wrote that note. Now!" His stomach dropped. A few feet away, 2 guards dragged Jake toward the elevators, the intern's face pale with panic. Carlos's blood turned to ice. They'd caught him, and the note, his words, his warning, had Jake's fingerprints all over it. But worse, Carlos had been seen talking to him. The confrontation. The fluorescent lights of the security office buzzed like angry wasps as Carlos lurked just outside the door, his back pressed against the cold concrete wall. Through the narrow window, he could see Jake slumped in a chair, his face ashen under the harsh glare. Two security officers loomed over him, their expressions unreadable. "We know you didn't write this note yourself," one of them growled, slapping the paper against the table. "Who put you up to this?" Carlos's stomach twisted. He had to do something. But walking in there would be suicide. He'd lose his job, maybe worse. Cho's words echoed in his mind. No loose ends. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone and dialed the only person he could trust. Marisol answered on the second ring. "Poppy? What's wrong?" "They have the intern," Carlos whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the ventilation system. "They think he's the one who warned Cray about the camera." A sharp inhale. "Did you tell them?" "No, but they'll figure it out. They always do." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fear. Then Marisol's voice came through, steady and firm. "You have to talk to Cray. Directly, before Cho gets to him first." Carlos closed his eyes. She was right. But how? Cray was untouchable, surrounded by layers of assistance and security. Unless... "I know where he parks," Carlos muttered. The underground garage was eerily quiet at 7:30 p.m. The only sounds a distant drip of water and the hum of the backup generators. Carlos crouched behind a concrete pillar, his work shirt damp with sweat. He'd been waiting for 43 minutes. Then headlights. A sleek black Mercedes rolled into the reserved spot near the elevator. The door opened and Daniel Cray stepped out, his tailored suit immaculate despite the late hour. Carlos's pulse pounded his ears. This was it. He stepped into the open. Cray froze, his hand instinctively going to his phone. "Mendez?" His voice was sharp, wary. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you, sir." "About the camera in your office." A flicker of something. Surprise? Fear crossed Cray's face. "How do you know about that?" Carlos swallowed hard. "Because I'm the one who found it. And I know who put it there." Cray's eyes narrowed. "Evelyn." It wasn't a question. Before Carlos could respond, another set of headlights cut through the darkness. A familiar silver Lexus, Cho's car, turned into the garage. Cray's jaw tightened. "Get in." He yanked open the Mercedes passenger door. Carlos hesitated only a second before sliding inside. The leather seat smelled of expensive cologne and power. Cray didn't start the car. Instead, he turned to Carlos, his voice low and urgent. "Tell me everything." The words spilled out in a rush. The hidden camera, Cho's phone call, the note. Cray listened without interruption, his fingers tapping a silent rhythm on the steering wheel. When Carlos finished, Cray exhaled sharply. "She's been moving money. Small amounts, spread across dummy accounts. I suspected, but..." He trailed off, watching through the rearview mirror as Cho's car parked 3 rows back. "You have proof?" Carlos asked. Cray reached into his briefcase and pulled out a USB drive. "Enough to raise questions. Not enough to act on. Yet." He turned to Carlos, his gaze intense. "But if we can access that camera's feed..." A sharp rap on the window made them both jump. Evelyn Cho stood outside, her perfect smile not reaching her eyes. "Daniel, working late with the janitor?" Her tone dripped with faux amusement. Cray rolled down the window, just enough to speak. Carlos was just explaining a maintenance issue. Nothing to concern yourself with. Cho's eyes flicked to Carlos, and for a split second, her mask slipped, revealing something cold and calculating. How diligent of him. She straightened. "Don't forget, we have that board meeting first thing. Big day tomorrow." "Wouldn't miss it," Cray said smoothly. They watched in silence as Cho walked to the elevator, her heels clicking like a metronome counting down to disaster. The moment the doors closed, Cray turned to Carlos. "That camera is our only shot. I need you to get that footage. Tonight." Carlos's mouth went dry. "Me? But security. You know the building better than anyone. The shifts, the blind spots." Cray pressed a USB into his hand. If we don't stop her tomorrow, this company is finished. And so are we. Outside, a garage light flickered and died, plunging him into deeper shadow. The heist. The USB drive felt like a live wire in Carlos's pocket as he rode the service elevator back to the executive floor. The building was deserted at this hour. Just him, the hum of the elevator motor, and the weight of what he was about to do. Cray's words played on a loop in his mind. If we don't stop her tomorrow, this company is finished. And so are we. The door slid open with a soft chime. Carlos froze, listening. Silence. He pushed his cleaning cart forward, the squeak of the wheels suddenly deafening in the empty hallway. Every shadow seemed to move. Every flicker of light made his pulse jump. The CEO's office door loomed ahead. Locked, of course. Carlos pulled out his master key, the one reserved for emergencies, and hesitated. This wasn't just breaking protocol. This was corporate espionage. If he got caught, he wouldn't just lose his job. He could go to jail. No loose ends. Cho's voice whispered in his memory. He turned the key. The office was exactly as he'd left it. Pristine, impersonal. The city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The smoke detector with its hidden camera stared down from the ceiling like a malevolent eye. Carlos dragged Cray's executive chair beneath it, the leather groaning under his weight. Up close, the device was smaller than he'd imagined. A tiny black dome no bigger than a dime, nearly invisible against the white plastic. His fingers brushed the edge. A sudden noise from the hallway made him jerk back. Footsteps. Carlos held his breath, heart hammering against his ribs. The steps grew louder, then paused right outside the door. A jingle of keys. He dropped to the floor just as the doorknob turned. The security guard, Michaels, his name tag read, swung his flashlight beam across the room. Carlos pressed himself flat behind Cray's desk, praying the shadows would swallow him whole. "Hello," Michaels called. "Anyone in here?" The light swept closer, illuminating the edge of Carlos's shoe. He squeezed his eyes shut. Then, a crackle from the radio on Michaels's belt. "Unit 3. We've got a triggered motion sensor in the server room. Possible intruder." Michaels hesitated, his light lingering on the chair still positioned under the smoke detector. Then, with a grunt, he turned and hurried out. Carlos didn't move for a full minute, his shirt soaked through with sweat. Then he was up, climbing the chair again, fingers probing the device. There, a nearly invisible seam. He pried it open with his fingernail, revealing a micro SD card nestled inside. The tiny chip felt like a ticking bomb as he slotted it into Cray's USB drive. The computer screen blinked to life, password protected. Carlos cursed under his breath. Of course Cray hadn't thought to give him login credentials. Then he remembered Marisol's stories about her law firm's IT guy. Most people use something personal, she'd said. Birthdays, anniversaries, kids' names. He typed Daniel Creso. Incorrect. D. Cray 2024. Incorrect. A third attempt. The date from a framed photo on Cray's desk, the politician handshake. The screen unlocked. Carlos nearly laughed in disbelief as folders appeared. He plugged in a USB, dragging files with names like Project Phoenix and Q4 transfers onto the drive. The progress bar crawled. 5%, 12%, a noise at the door. Carlos spun just as the lights blazed on. Evelyn Cho stood in the doorway, her designer suit impeccable despite the hour. Her red lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well," she purred, "aren't you full of surprises?" Behind her, 2 security guards stepped into view. The USB drive beeped. Transfer complete. The reckoning. The USB drive burned in Carlos's palm like a hot coal. Cho's smile widened as she stepped further into the office, her heels clicking against the polished floor like a countdown to disaster. The 2 security guards flanked her, their expressions unreadable behind mirrored sunglasses. "Carlos Mendez," Cho said, tilting her head. 12 years of flawless service. Never a single complaint. She'd sked. And now this? Stealing company data? Carlos's throat tightened. He could feel the weight of the USB drive, the proof of Cho's betrayal, pressing against his skin. But the guards were too close. There was no way to run. Then, A voice from the doorway. That's enough, Evelyn. Daniel Cray stood silhouetted against the fluorescent hallway lights, his usual polished demeanor replaced by something darker. In his hand, a phone with its recording app open. Cho's composure flickered. Daniel, you're here late. Funny, Cray said, stepping inside. I was about to say the same to you. The tension in the room crackled like static before a storm. Carlos slowly edged toward Cray, the USB drive clutched tight. Cho's gaze darted between them. You don't understand what's happening here, she said, her voice smooth but laced with warning. This man was caught going through your files. He planted that ridiculous story about a camera. Enough. Cray held up his phone. I have Carlos's original voicemail from last night, time-stamped, before you conveniently detained that intern. One of the security guards shifted uncomfortably. Cho's smile vanished. You always were sentimental, Daniel, she spat. Protecting the little people. But this isn't about loyalty. It's about survival. Cray's jaw tightened. No, it's about fraud, embezzlement, and I have proof. He nodded to Carlos, who handed over the USB drive. For the first time, real fear flashed in Cho's eyes. The next 48 hours unfolded like a corporate thriller. By dawn, federal agents had frozen Cho's offshore accounts. By noon, the board had emergency voted her out. And by the end of the week, Summit Dynamics was front-page news, not for scandal, but for its unprecedented transparency reforms. Carlos watched it all from the sidelines, half expecting to be swept under the rug, until Cray called him into his office. The CEO stood by the window, the same skyline stretching behind him. But the room felt different now, lighter, somehow. Carlos, Cray said, turning, I owe you more than I can say. Carlos shifted on his feet. I just did what anyone would have done. Cray laughed. No, you did what no one else did. He slid a folder across the desk, which is why I'm offering you a new position. Head of corporate ethics. Full salary, benefits, and, he added with a smirk, an office with a window. Carlos stared at the papers. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Cray said. This company needs people who see what others ignore, who aren't afraid to speak up. 1 year later, Carlos stood at a podium in Summit's renovated lobby, his daughter beaming from the front row. The plaque beside him read, Whistleblower Protection Policy, established 2024. Reporters' cameras flashed as he adjusted the microphone. A year ago, I was just a guy who emptied your trash, he began. Today, I'm here to remind you, the most dangerous thing in any company isn't greed. It's silence. As applause filled the room, Carlos caught Cray's nod from the crowd. The janitor turned ethicist smiled. Somewhere in the ceiling above them, a smoke detector blinked harmlessly, its wiring now exposed for all to see. Did this story inspire you? Real change starts with courage. Hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because heroes don't always wear suits. Sometimes they carry mops.